night, my mom and her boyfriend had gone to the bar late at night and would likely not be back till 2 a.m. I'm 20 years old, so I'm not afraid to stay home with my little sister late at night, but I do get a little worried because I'd be easy to take down if there was an intruder. Also, a big problem is that our house has a sliding glass back door that doesn't lock properly. Thankfully, it's only the back door and we live in an okay area, but it still made me a little worried. We also have another back door to my mom's room that does lock, so after they leave around 11ish, I climb into bed, and after locking the front door and turning off the lights, I start to drift off into sleep. All of a sudden, I hear some noises like someone's in the house, but being half asleep, I shook it off as my mom must have came home early to grab something. This was very unlike me, since I'm usually overly cautious and probably would have texted or called my mom, but I was just so exhausted that I didn't want to worry too much. I went back to sleep and got up the next morning as though nothing happened. My little sister was already up and asked me if I heard weird noises last night at around maybe 12. I told her yeah, but I thought it was just mom coming home. It turns out they hadn't come home until 2 a.m., and our screen to my mom's room's back door was broken, and the other screen to the other back door was off the hinges slightly. Why someone felt the need to mess with a screen door that doesn't even lock, I don't know. What I do know is we need to get our back door fixed. For some reason, the cops were not called, probably because nothing was stolen and no one was hurt, just traumatized. That night was creepy and the only time someone had made it in our house, and although they didn't take anything, we were still really creeped out. To make it all worse, about a month before that night, my little sister was home alone for about 30 minutes, and had heard someone trying to jiggle the front door handle and the passcode buttons being pushed. We don't have a door key, we have a passcode that beeps when you enter the code. We haven't had any other break-in-like occurrences again, and it's been about a little over a year. Thank God. To be completely honest, men never usually hit on me or approach me at all. This is because I am a very large woman. It is weird when they do. It has only happened twice in the last 6 or 7 years. The first of those times was okay, but a little uncomfortable since I was in an elevator with this complete stranger in my apartment building, and he kept asking me out for coffee. I know I'm not attractive, so I never believe people when they act like I am. I am also not looking to date. The second time, however, just happened within the last hour. After work, I took the bus down to the grocery store. It was a few minutes in the opposite direction from my apartment, but they have some pretty good deals, so I like to go at least once per month. As I was just starting to walk away from the bulk food area, this is also the only store with sesame glazed cashews, so I was getting some. I heard someone say something like, "Hey." There were other people in the area, so I figured this person was trying to get the attention of a deli or bakery employee nearby. I saw him out of the corner of my eye, but paid no attention and walked off to continue my shopping. I had used the phone in the store that automatically rings up the taxi company to call my ride before exiting and walking off to the side where the benches are to wait for it to arrive. A few people walked behind the bench as they also left. Then one stopped and said hello. I still paid no attention. The only person I talked to, besides customers at work, is my sister, and she was back at our apartment. He came a little closer, cleared his throat, and said, "Excuse me." I turned. It was the guy. It was then that I realized he had been trying to get my attention inside the store. "Oh, hello." I smiled. I really am anxious out in public, but I am decent at faking friendliness. "Do you live around here?" No, I'm just waiting for my ride home." "Ah, I live just over there." He pointed at the townhouse complex across the street. "I could give you a ride if you like." Well, that was fast and forward. "Oh, thanks, but that's alright. I already called my ride and they're on their way." "Are you certain they are coming? Because it is no problem to drive you." I assured him that my ride was for sure on the way. He kept trying over and over to get me to come with him despite my polite refusals. He offered to put his phone number in my phone so I could call him any time or day of night and he would come pick me up. Well, that was creepy. I told him the truth and said that I didn't have a cell phone. He immediately challenged that by asking how I called for a ride then. I said that there was a phone inside the store that I used. He chuckled and asked, "Are you worried that if I gave you a ride, your husband would kill me?" Husband? Yeah, right. I'm 35 and have never even had a boyfriend. Oh, I mean, he might. He can get like that sometimes. Better if I just take my cab when it arrives. I lied. Well, you don't have to tell them that I gave you a ride. That wouldn't be very honest of me. Besides, the folks at the taxi company know who I am, so I can't just no-show them. Which is true. I've been a regular for the past 6 years, and they know me by voice now. He then asked me where I'm from. I said I was from this general area. He then said that he was from Africa. I could tell that already, so I just politely asked which country. He told me and then started talking about being from a tribe and how the tribes would fight each other for things, mostly about how whichever tribe won, they could marry women from the other tribe and not have to pay for that privilege and whatnot. I was just praying that my cab would come soon. I kept turning to check. Finally, it arrived. I stood up and said, "Looks like my ride's here." He said it was nice to talk to me as I was putting my bags in the car. I hopped in the cab, thanked the cabbie for finally saving me, and we were off. The guy must have offered me a ride at least a dozen times. But that wasn't the end of it. As I was getting my stuff out of the cab once arriving at my complex, there are multiple buildings and our parking lot slopes down a hill and I am at the top of the hill. The man drove past me. He doesn't live here too. He followed me. I don't know what he hoped to accomplish since the buildings are secured and he doesn't know my first name, let alone my last name, which is the only name listed beside the buzzer. I hustled my fat butt into the building and hope I don't ever meet that guy again. I just received a library science degree. I was pretty excited to get a job as a librarian and went on my way to job interview as a newly minted LIS graduate. So I applied to a job at a public library an hour away, and I hear back from a man who tells me he'd like to talk about a job. I feel good about this, and he says he likes to meet down the street from the library. That is odd, but maybe it's a very casual library. So I decide to find the address, and it ends up being a coffee shop. I get out of my car and walk into the coffee shop, where I see an older man in a nice coat sitting on the couch. He seems pretty laid back. Now, I'm starting to think this is odd. If I was a young female, I'd hightail it out of there. However, I'm a late 20s male and I decided to go talk to the guy waving me over. Looking back, even being who I was, maybe I shouldn't have. He asks if I'm Alec and I tell him yes. So I sit down and he sits on literally the couch across from me. I gave him my usual speech about what I can offer him for the library. He says that sounds interesting. Same old, same old. All job interviews are fairly polite. However, this is odd and I can feel it. It seems more like a date than an interview. He tells me about the job, which sounds very made up, writing press releases for the library. After that, he says he'll email me about the job, but not before telling me that he would like a book suggestion from me. Well, he likes mysteries and I tell him I like the Devonport novels by John Sandford. He gives a creepy smile and says that sounds great. When I get home, as I was living with my parents at the time as the job search went on, my dad pokes holes in the job he gave me. He says why couldn't they just get someone already on staff to write a press release? My dad is right. The whole thing sounded fishy. Well, I never got that email, nor heard or ever saw that man around again. Nor do I have any proof from the library website if he is even associated with them. I would say let's not meet, but I'm not even sure what exactly this whole thing was in the first place. This story took place when I was 19 in the early 2000s. I was attending university and had recently moved in with 2 other girls in a shared house. I had broken up with my boyfriend. It didn't go well as far as breakups are concerned, and I endured threats of harm, which led to me moving into the shared house so I could escape his clutches, and so he didn't know where I was. This is relevant to the story because it perhaps explains my true judgment and vulnerability in the following situation. The dialogue is paraphrased as best as I can recall. It was probably a lot more awkward, bumbling, and wordy than that which I have written. Since being a teenager, I've always been into online gaming, and following my move into the shared house had reignited my passions for it. I had deleted all my gaming-related software prior to going to university, partly because I thought I should have grown out of it, and partly because I was hiding it from my aforementioned ex. I didn't want him to know about my nerdy pastime. This was many years before being female and a gamer was something considered cool, and I was reluctant for people to find out about it, so I stopped doing it. After setting up a new, terrible router in my new digs, this was before ADSL was around, I quickly found myself in an online clan with friends I'd played with when I was young. Now, you youngsters of today might not have a Scoobies as to how online gaming used to work, but before Steam, in order to play clan games, you had to use Chat Client, IRC for the oldies out there, in order to organize games and plan events. Your clan would have a chat room, other clans had their own chat rooms, and you would also go into league chat rooms to find games and organize servers, and that sort of thing. You'd usually hang out in perhaps 10 different chat rooms, and this meant you always had plenty of people to talk to when you were bored. It was a great community, and this is how I met Marcus. Marcus was in a different clan to me, and he was a great player. He was quite a bit older than me, at the age of 29. In IRC, he was hilarious, and he was always around to chat to. We quickly developed a friendship, and he would stand in for a player in our clan sometimes, although his skills far surpassed ours. As you can probably imagine, dear reader, this headed towards an obvious next stage. As a vulnerable 19-year-old girl who had just been through a traumatic breakup, getting attention from an older, popular gamer guy, although we private messaged frequently, I told him in no uncertain terms that I was just out of a terrible relationship and wasn't looking for anything like that. He, in fact, lived with his girlfriend, which was the initial red flag I chose to ignore. I didn't really care about that. I was just somebody having fun online. If he wanted to spend hours gaming with and talking to me instead of with his girlfriend, I wasn't one to question it. I suppose I was a bit of an a-hole back then. Marcus was a common visitor in our clan chat, and he had befriended most of my clanmates too. We had swapped photos, and he had never been inappropriate, and trust me, as a 19-year-old girl playing largely teenage boy-frequented team games, I had already seen a vast array of wiener pics, creepy messages, sexist remarks, and been tricked by links to Goatsy, Tub Girl, and other classics. If I'm honest, I liked the fact that he was there to talk to. It progressed to us swapping numbers and texting each other. I confided in him, and he confided in me. We told each other about our failed and failing relationships. We confessed to having done different types of drugs. He still dabbled occasionally, I did not. And we swapped game strategies. We talked about our families, future plans, pets, etc. He started calling me on my phone, and we started chatting regularly, for hours at a time. My housemates started questioning who my secret boyfriend was. Fast forward perhaps 6 months, and one night Marcus suggested we meet up as friends for a drink and perhaps a bit of gaming. I was nervous, but I was also excited. After all our hours of conversation and bonding, perhaps we were destined to be together. He still had his girlfriend though, and I still maintained I only wanted friendship, as did he, so I kept these thoughts to myself. I decided to meet him and see if there was a spark or if I was attracted to him. If I wasn't, I reasoned, then no harm done. We were only meeting as friends. If I was, then, well, perhaps something could happen. 19-year-old me, as I've mentioned, wasn't really interested in the collateral. I'd been hurt in my breakup, and I didn't give a crap about other people's relationships failing. I just wanted to have fun. Like I said, a bit of an a-hole. We arranged a date in the university half-term, when I knew my housemates would be at their family homes, and I'd have the shared house to myself. He planned to stay for a night. 30-something-year-old me still looks back on this scenario and winces. What was I thinking he expected here? He told me what kind of car he had. I'm no expert, so let's say it was a heavily modded 3-liter beast thing. Of course, idiot 19-year-old me found the prospect of a 29-year-old man with a cool car very exciting. As the car pulled up outside the house, my throat tightened and my anxiety kicked in. Heart pounding, I went to open the door. It was too late to back out now. The first reaction I had was this guy was big, and I mean perhaps 6'5" and ripped. I'd seen a few photos, but they had never shown the extent of his muscles. He didn't look big in the photos I'd seen, but in real life he looked like a nightclub bouncer. My second instinctive reaction was a feeling of complete danger. He was actually good looking, but something was amiss. It is hard to describe, but there was a look in his eyes as he appraised me that made my blood run cold. I forced a smile and gave him a huge hug, asking him to come inside. I stupidly told myself it was actually my newly developed anxiety disorder from the breakup and being threatened, working overtime, and not him that was throwing my flight reaction into overdrive. And over the threshold he walked. I'd invited him in. I asked him to come into the kitchen, and I have to be fair here. It is a strong possibility that he was socially inept and anxious too. In fact, that's what I convinced myself as he sat down and I fetched him a drink. It is also likely he is high on speed or cocaine, as he seemed very twitchy and nervous, and he was chewing gum like he was trying to beat a world record. I tried to engage him in conversation, but unlike the online and phone personality, which was full of confidence, he completely clammed up. I asked him if he wanted to grab some food, and he made some weird comment about only being able to eat certain things like protein because he was a bodybuilder. I wasn't hungry at all. I felt nauseous with the adrenaline sloshing around in my system, but I decided I needed to get him out of my house and see if we could be more at ease with each other, or see if I could get rid of him somehow. He agreed to drive to find somewhere to have a drink. I got into his ridiculously pimped out car and strapped in. Heading out, I felt a lot calmer and more comfortable. I think it was because his eyes weren't boring into my soul any longer. My anxiety reduced somewhat, and I started to ask him about the journey up. He traveled about 3 hours to meet up. We eventually found a pub that was opened and he pulled up. We got out and grabbed a table. Again, he seemed very on edge and my adrenaline started pumping again. Those eyes. I couldn't decide if he was nervous, high, or deciding how he could murder me. We must have looked a strange couple to the other patrons in the place, of which the majority were old men sitting at the bar. A 19-year-old, young-looking girl with a huge, muscly guy who looked like he might beat someone to death with his bare hands. I took a deep breath and did what any sensible girl in that situation would do. I ordered a large drink and made a decision to get drunk. He ordered a Coke because he was driving. I know, stop judging me. After an hour of the most awkward, stilted conversation and feeling like the whole place was watching our awkwardness, I asked to go home. I hate myself for referencing a teenager's crappy movie, but if you've ever seen the Twilight film when she's in the car and she touches his cold skin and shrinks away, I feel like that all the way back, although he didn't touch me. That palpable awkwardness hanging in the air between us. I felt so paranoid and I felt like I was in danger. When we pulled up to the front of the house, I decided to be honest and try to escape the situation, and I said, "Look, I know you were supposed to stay, but I feel like you're on edge and I'm tired, so maybe you should go home and we'll talk about it tomorrow." He took his seatbelt off and turned to look me straight in the eye. "I can't go home now. It's late and I don't want to drive 3 hours. I'm really tired too. Can I just stay here on the sofa or something?" And that, my friends, is where I made perhaps my second idiot decision of the day and said, "Of course you can." This is where my housemate perhaps saved me from the jaws of the crocodile. As we trudged into my house, me, a 110-pound girl, and him, a 220-pound hulk of muscle, wondering how I was going to survive the night, yet not wanting to cross the boundaries into impoliteness, telling him to screw off. I heard a wonderful sound. One of my housemates had returned. Loud, brash, and gobby, my dear housemate Sarah, who I actually didn't know particularly well at this point, was there, right there. She eyed Marcus top to bottom and said, "Who's this then?" Strangely, I felt embarrassed at the circumstances and paranoid I'd been completely overreacting due to my anxiety. so I just mumbled about him being a friend from home who was going to stay overnight in my room while I stayed in our other housemate's bed in the next room. Sarah's room was on the ground floor 2 flights down. She looked suspicious, but to her credit, casually flounced off into the kitchen, asking if we wanted something to eat. I said that we would be going to bed so that Marcus could get up early to set off. She said, "Just shout if you want some food or whatever." In retrospect, I think she wanted to give me an option if I needed help. This is where my story tips from uncomfortable into, oh no, this is bad. I am seriously getting palpitations writing this out. I've buried this memory of this day for over 10 years now. I showed Marcus to my room and told him to have a good night's sleep, and I'd be in the next room. He sat on my bed and patted on the bed next to him with his hand to indicate for me to sit down. I just cannot forget those eyes. He looked like a wolf, a disgusting, gigantic, muscle-bound wolf. I laughed awkwardly and spoke in a placating way. "Come on, you know I'm not going to do that. Let's talk about this tomorrow." I'm not sure if it was survival technique, but I just felt it necessary to keep mentioning the next day like I was giving him a way out, because it definitely felt like we had crossed a line from awkward but friendly scenario into a possible assault scenario. I stayed near the door and he said, "I just want to cuddle a little bit." His eyes bored into mine and I felt a sudden uncontrolled urge to break eye contact or he was going to pounce. I looked away and my eyes found my phone charger. "Not gonna happen, buddy. Don't be daft," I said as I walked over and pulled it out from the wall. I then didn't dare glance in his direction again as I all but ran out of the room and casually said, "Good night, see you in the morning." I closed the door on him, still sitting on the bed. He hadn't moved, thank God. If he had moved, I think I would have fled screaming. I went into the room next door, which belongs to my absent housemate. I turned and locked the door with the flimsy lock, but I felt better. I was shaking from the adrenaline of the past few hours. I plugged in my phone next to my bed and climbed in, fully clothed. I didn't feel safe removing any clothing, and besides, Marcus was in my room and I was in my housemate's. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. Suddenly, my phone lit up. He was texting me. "Please come and lie with me," it said. I couldn't believe it. He was lying perhaps 10 feet away and he was texting me. I replied, "Stop it, not gonna happen." He then proceeded to text me around 10 more times, pleading that he just wanted to cuddle and didn't want anything sexual. A strange part of me almost believed it. He did seem so lonely, despite having a girlfriend. It oozed from his pores. After the 10th time, I was quite blunt, replying, "N.O. I'm going to sleep now, stop texting." My phone went quiet. I lay wide awake for around 20 minutes. This was before iPhones, so I couldn't distract myself with the internet. I may well have had a Nokia 3310. I decided to wait until he was asleep. Then I could breathe and begin to try and sleep myself. I felt my resolve crumbling and started crying silently. I was such an idiot for letting this possibly dangerous man who was twice my size into my home, and nobody even knew. Thank God Sarah had appeared. That thought gave me comfort. After around an hour, I started to calm down and decided to sleep. Then I could deal with getting him out of my house in the morning. And then, I heard my bedroom door creak open. My heart actually stopped, I'm sure of it. "He's going to the toilet," I rationalized as the alarm bells clanged in my head, and I struggled to fight the wave of adrenaline that was washing over me, telling me to run, get out. To get from my bedroom to the bathroom, he had to pass the room I was in. I held my breath, heard him creeping quietly, and past the door he went, towards the bathroom. I let go of the breathing I had been holding. I'm just overreacting. He's just a nerdy guy with a lack of social skills. He's not dangerous. I'm fine, I told myself. I heard the toilet flush and the tap go. Creak, creak. He was on his way back again. It was at this moment that the doorknob started to turn. I practically leapt out of bed, as silently as possible given the fact that I was absolutely crapping myself, and faced the door in the darkness. I didn't know what to do. Should I get a weapon? Shout for Sarah? Phone somebody? Just then I heard his whispered voice as the doorknob kept twiddling. "Hey, Are you awake? Please, please let me come in. I need you." It was like the Three Pigs, except my house wasn't made of straw, but rather some really terrible MDF wood and a crappy €2 brass lock. And the wolf wanted to snuggle. I leaned on the bed to make it creak, like I had just sat up and faked a sleepy voice. "What? What's up? What do you want? I'm asleep." He made another plea, whispering it through the crack of the door. "Did you lock the door? Please let me in for just a minute. I need to talk to you." I wheeled him away. "It's locked. I'm sleeping. Go away." The doorknob stopped. I held my breath. No footsteps. Suddenly the doorknob started turning one way then the other violently. "Let me in," he whispered furiously. I ran at the door. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do, but I felt like I needed to attempt to hold it closed. He had wanted to smash his way in. It would have been easy enough for him, but I wasn't going to let him in without a fight. As he struggled and tried to push the door open, I turned to the gap in the door and with my most commanding voice said, "You are not coming in here. Go back into the other room now. I mean it." And to my utter relief, the doorknob stopped moving. I heard his footsteps skulk back to my room. Then I sat against the door and shook it. I ended up blocking the door with a set of drawers and lying wrapped up in a duvet behind that in case he tried again. I was desperate to urinate, but I was not going to attempt to get to the bathroom, and somehow I slept. The next morning I woke up, moved the drawers, and pelted downstairs. People were outside on the street, the birds were singing, I heard Sarah stirring. I know it sounds stupid, but I honestly felt like I'd survived a natural disaster or something. I was amazed I'd survived the night intact. I eventually heard Marcus slopping down the stairs. I stood in the kitchen with the TV on, and when he walked in, for some reason I felt the urge to act like nothing had happened. "Morning," I said, and offered him a cup of tea. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. He declined and mumbled about having to set off to beat the traffic, and with that and an awkward hug, he was gone, out of my house and life. He disappeared off all our usual chat places soon after this, and one of our mutual friends kept me informed about what had happened. I was terrified that he had come back from me, but the 3-hour journey distance was somewhat reassuring. To his credit, he left me alone after he drove away that day. I heard he split from the girlfriend and went traveling. Around 5 years later, I found out from the mutual friend that I still game with to this day that Marcus actually later died. He got involved in drugs whilst traveling and was found dead. The authorities there concluded an overdose. His poor mother was apparently all over Facebook and local newspapers saying she wanted an investigation and was trying to get the British Embassy involved. She said her dear son would never do drugs and he'd been an innocent man who was murdered. Of course, I know better. He was not right in the head. He was exactly the type of person I would imagine to end up dead after taking drugs. And sadly, the news reports say he may have been subject to a honey trap. He met a girl online and flew to meet her, then he was found dead. This made me really sad to hear despite my experience. I sometimes wonder if he wasn't just looking for somebody to love him. I still ponder occasionally about the what-ifs. I flip between thinking he was a would-be assaulter to perhaps just being misunderstood, antisocial recluse. I still feel shame and guilt. I still feel like I narrowly escaped a very bad outcome, and I still feel like I perhaps led him on, and because he was not sound of mind, perhaps he misinterpreted my signals. But then perhaps he should have known better, and perhaps he was taking advantage of my vulnerability. I feel like I needed help, and I felt like my own need for a friend outweighed my common sense. All I know is that I was never that stupid again, and I've never met anybody off the internet again. You might be amused to find out that I still regularly play online games and still game with some of my friends from all those years ago, some of whom knew Marcus. He has an online memorial where they leave him comments. So, internet friend, we sure can't meet any longer, but I hope you found some peace before your tragic end. The past week I was on vacation at the beach with my entire maternal side of the family. I'm talking everyone. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and my grandmother. This includes my oldest cousin, Orange's fiancée, Banana. The trip was his inaugural visit because we come every year. During the morning of our week-long stays, my cousin and I like to take bike rides to the different types of touristy attractions there are to see in the island. It wasn't a hassle, as there were many different bike paths crisscrossing through the island. This day in particular was no different. We were planning to go see the lighthouse, which was a good 20-minute bike ride each way. A little backstory. All week on the beach, I had been reading a book about Charles Manson. I know, a little weird, but it was a great beach read and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had loaned the book to Banana because he mentioned that he'd like to read it as well. On the day in mention, he was about halfway through the book. Also, I was wearing a bikini with a pair of running shorts pulled over my bottoms and sandals. This wasn't usual attire for bike riding as it could get pretty hot and humid, and I wasn't the only one wearing this sort of outfit among my cousins. I like wearing bikini tops, sue me. So Banana and I are a little ahead of my other cousins talking about the book aforementioned. He seemed a little shy about being around such a big family. He's an only child, so I was trying to make it a point to him to be welcomed. Banana is generally a nice person, maybe a little reserved, so we made easy conversation. At this point, we had used a shortcut to get to our destination faster, which led us through a sort of swampy area. There are about 3 houses along the bike paths that people lived in for most of the summer, and across the street a little ways was the public access path to the beach with condos and houses. It was a secluded area, but it was bright and sunny, and so I didn't really pay any mind to it. As we're waiting for the others to catch up, I hear a sharp call from the front porch from the middle house say, "Hey, Missy." Our conversation momentarily halted. Banana and I looked at each other, then back at the house where the call came from to see if the male voice was talking to us. Surely he must have. There was no one else around. We paused for a second, and he called us again. "Hey you, Missy." As I said before, me and Banana were a little ahead of the others, who were coming around the bend a little slowly. It was a little hilly, and we decided to wait in front of the house where Old Guy called at me. Being the only girl around, I knew he must have been talking to me. Instantly, I got a bad feeling in my stomach, the same one I get whenever I'm walking around the mall at night alone, or crossing the street in front of a car full of guys, or driving around with my windows open. Silently, I made eye contact with the guy, who was sitting on the front porch about 20 feet from the bike path. Old Guy was wearing an old Navy flag shirt, jeans, and dirty sneakers as well as a baseball hat. I'm not good with guessing ages, but I'd have to say he was around mid-60s. His eyes were squinting at me and, more importantly, my chest. Uncrossing his legs, he stood and walked to the edge of the porch. My stomach churned once more and I began to feel a little scared. This could seem like nothing, I'm sure, but I've been wrong before about this sort of thing. I'm sure this will seem trivial to you all, but the way he was looking at me and my chest made me intensely uncomfortable. Meekly, I turned to Banana and nodded my head down the bike path as a suggestion for us to continue. He maintained a fierce glare, and just as he opened up his mouth to say something, Banana spoke up finally. "Hey man, just leave her alone. We're just waiting on the others, then we'll leave you alone." The old man huffed at us, still not moving away from his perch where he could easily stare at us, more specifically me. After a few silent seconds, the first of my cousins began to come around the bend, so Banana and I prepared to keep going. As we were pedaling away, though, I swore I heard Old Man say in the still and silent humid air, "Cover yourself up next time." Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.